Hey guys, Clint here, Horn and Fiber. I've got another little powder horn in the works that's all ready for a base plug. I thought we would do a hand-carved low dome plug on this one. Let's get started. Before we get started, I just want to mention this is by far my favorite style of base plug for a powder horn. It doesn't require fancy tools. It can be made completely with hand tools, although a few modern power tools do make the job a whole lot easier. It's appropriate for highly engraved horns of the French and Indian War up through the American Revolution. It also is appropriate for simple farmhouse horns from late 18th century, 19th century, even 20th century. It's got universal appeal. It's found from New England all the way down to Georgia. So I've already rounded the inside of this horn using heat and squared it up to make sure everything's good and flat. If you need help with either one of those steps, please check out our other videos on rounding the base of a horn and rounding the base of a horn part 2, where we cover those steps in detail. Our materials for this base plug are really simple. We're going to use a 3/4 inch pine board like you get from your local hardware store. Let's get started. We'll begin by tracing a circle onto our board that matches or is just slightly larger than the outside diameter of our horn. These circle templates are available at most hobby stores and are definitely worth the investment, especially if you're planning on making more than one powder horn. You could also use an old school pencil compass to draw your circle, or find some object that is about the same diameter as the outside of your powder horn and simply trace around it. Speaking of that, some folks might ask, well, why not just trace around the base of the horn? And you certainly can do that, although this horn, even though I've rounded the inside of it using heat, the outside of the horn is not perfectly round because the wall thickness is not the same or not uniform all the way around. And I really want to start with as close to a perfect circle as I can get, just to make fitting the base plug up a little easier. For cutting our base plug out, we have several options, including a coping saw, which is probably the most historically accurate, although not my personal favorite. I did many base plugs this way when I first started building powder horns. Another option is an electric jigsaw. Of course, presetting the table angle to 11 or 12 degrees will save you time on shaping the taper of your base plug. I try to leave about 1/16 of an inch of material between my cut line and the pencil line I drew on the board. Of course, it's hard to beat a bandsaw if you have access to one. Here again, I have my table angle preset at 11 or 12 degrees, which is the average taper on the inside of a cow horn. We can refine our cut and bring it up to the line using rasp and files. We can also smooth the taper and make sure that it's even all the way around. This is probably the way it was done in the 18th century and the way I did many base plugs when I first started building horns. Of course, modern power tools can speed the process up and make it a lot easier. Note the angle of the table, you guessed it, about 11 or 12 degrees. Whatever tool I'm using, the goal is the same: to bring the cut line up to the pencil line and maintain an even taper all the way around the base plug. When you finish with the firework or the sander, depending on which tool you have available, what we want to end up with is a nice round base plug that has a tapered profile that fits snugly just over halfway into the horn. This should give us enough material down inside the horn that we can get our pins in and make a nice secure connection between the base plug and the horn, as well as enough material sticking out of the horn to shape that low dome profile that we're looking for when we're finished.
coat the inside face of the base plug with a thin layer of wood glue and let it dry. This just adds a moisture barrier inside the horn.
We need to decide real quick how many pegs we want holding our base plug in. And unless you're copying a specific historic horn, it's really a matter of personal preference. Although, as I mentioned in an earlier video, northern horns and early horns tend to have fewer pegs, 4, 5, whereas later horns had a few more, 6 to 8, where southern horns could have as few as 4 or as many as 20. It's really a matter of personal preference. On this style horn, about this size, I like somewhere between 5 and 7 pegs.
The first thing I do is figure out about how the horn's going to hang and make a mark on the top of the horn. This will be 1 peg. From that mark, I measure the circumference of the horn base in either inches or centimeters, hoping for a number that divides even easily. In this case, I got 7 5/8 inches and 19.4 centimeters.
Since I had 2 numbers and neither one of them divide even easily, I've got some options. I could just randomly place the pins, and if this was a farmhouse horn, I might do that. This being a little bit of a higher end horn, I want my pins to be evenly spaced. I could take and simply divide the number by 2, like the 19.4 would give me 9.7. I could make a pin on top and bottom and then divide that by 2 and get 2 more pins on each side, and that would have 6 pins holding it in. I really like an odd number of pins, so I'm going to go for 5 on this. If I do 1.5 inches or just over 1.5 inches each way, that should give me 5 pins that are pretty evenly spaced, because 5 times 1.5 inches is 7.5, and 7 5/8 is my circumference. So if I fudge each pin just a little bit, we should come out pretty close. Let's lay it out and see what happens.
So starting at my top mark and burning 1 inch for accuracy, I'm going to come 1.5 inches in one direction, then 1.5 inches again. Then I'm going to go back to the top and repeat the process back in the other direction. Between my last 2 marks, that leaves me exactly 1 5/8 inches. I'm using one of my rounded mandrels to help support the base of the horn while I drill the holes.
Handmade pins offer a nice level of authenticity, and it's definitely worth making a set just for the experience. But for no more than it's going to show, which is really just going to be the end of them, round toothpicks like you buy at the grocery store work just as well, and they fit a 5/64 drill bit hole perfectly. So if I'm using handmade pins, I go ahead and sharpen one end to a taper. That way, when this feeds into the hole, it'll go through the hole easily, but then as I drive it in, the horn will compress it and make it round. The same thing is going to happen for the toothpick. It's already sharp, so it's going to feed into the hole pretty well on its own. It is going to get compressed. I don't need this whole toothpick though, so I'm going to cut this in half so I get 2 pins out of it. Matter of fact, for this horn, I need 5 pins, but I'm actually going to prep 8, just because you never know what might happen and suddenly you need another pin to change something out. So 4 toothpicks, cut in half, 8 pins. So I've decided that on this horn, I want my grain running horizontal with the way the horn's hanging. It really doesn't matter. You can have it run in any direction you want. But just to make sure I get it back in that position, I'm making a little indexing mark on top of the base plug and on that top hole on the horn. And I'll use those two to line it up when I get ready to put it in.
I run a bead of wood glue around the inside of the horn and pull it back up to the edge using my finger. Its purpose is to help create a waterproof seal. Traditionally, hot glue or beeswax or even some type of heavy grease could have been used for this application. Wood glue doesn't adhere to horn very well, so the pegs are what secure the base, not the glue.
And with that, our base plug is installed. At this point, I like to set the horn aside, usually overnight, give any glue that's in the body of the horn a chance to drain back down against the base plug, dry, and just seal everything up really good. Remember, the function of a powder horn is to carry powder and keep it dry. We'll let this sit overnight. We'll come back tomorrow. We'll shape our base plug into that nice low dome profile that we're looking for, and we'll make a staple for rear strap attachment. See you then. Where everything seems dry and airtight, let's start shaping a base plug.
I go ahead and trim the pegs off flush with the surface of the horn just to get them out of my way and make the horn a little bit more comfortable to handle.
One of the things that I find helpful is to draw a series of concentric circles on the base plug. I'll then use these as guides. They don't by any means need to be perfect. They're just meant to be rough guides.
The first pass can be a little aggravating as you're dealing with the sharp edge on our base plug blank. The goal is to create a taper between the outside of the horn and that first line.
Quick note here, for the majority of this rasp work, I'm working away from the horn and toward the base plug. You can go toward the horn, but you want to be extremely careful because the rasp will catch the edge of the horn and peel up little flakes. If you're going to heavily antique the horn, that's not really a big deal. But if you're looking for a nice clean finish, I really recommend working away from the horn body toward the base plug, and that eliminates the risk of doing that. So on our first pass with the rasp, I beveled from the edge of the horn to the first pencil line. So we're going to go around again, and this time we're going to go from about the middle of that first bevel to the second pencil line. And then we repeat the process one more time. All right, with our low dome kind of roughed in, I'm going to switch over to a file, start smoothing things out. All right, I'm pretty happy with that as kind of the foundation for our dome shape. I'm going to start sanding now. I really like these foam sanding blocks that you get at the hardware store. They're great for working a rounded surface like that without creating flats. Of course, you can always make something yourself that kind of serves the same purpose. We've got a foam padding, board backing, and do the same thing. All right, I'm pretty happy with that as far as our low dome shape goes. Let's make a staple. So most of the staples that I see on original horns are really quite delicate and fine. They're usually made out of some type of wire. For this staple, we're going to use 1/16 welding rod. I'm going to start by cutting a 4-inch section.
I then use a pair of side cutters to trim the staple legs so that they're the same length but have angles running in opposite directions. If you've ever run fencing and drove fence post staples, you'll understand real quickly why I'm doing this.
So as the staple is driven through the base plug, those angles on the legs are going to cause the two legs to go in opposing directions. This is going to just create a really secure connection that's going to make that staple extremely hard to ever pull out. And I'm not worried about going all the way through the base plug. It's going to be a watertight seal around the legs. If this staple ever should come out and need to be replaced, those holes can always be plugged.
I find I get the best results when I go back and forth driving each leg independently and not the center of the staple.
So sometimes as you're driving that staple in, because the two legs are going in opposite directions, they'll cause the back of the staple to want to twist slightly. It's not an issue. Just take a pair of pliers, grab hold of it, straighten it out. How much you leave sticking out is really a matter of personal preference. Things like what's pleasing to your eye, what type of strap you're planning on putting on there. I like mine fairly close because that's what I see on most originals. Well, there we have our hand-shaped low dome base plug with a wire staple. I hope you found something in this video that was useful to you. If you have questions or comments, please leave them down below. Sure would appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Hope you have a great day. And as always, keep the fire burning.